Okay, so what if I told you the best way to build a multi-million-dollar company was to actively try not to build a business at all? Sounds crazy, right? Well, that's the bizarre and brilliant story of Derek Sivers and CD Baby. It's a company that was started completely by accident, grew by breaking every single rule in the book, and was ultimately given away. Let's dive in and unpack how he did it.
This one idea, right here, it's pretty much the compass for our entire journey today. Sivers was convinced that when you make a company, you're not just creating a product or a service. You're actually designing your own perfect world, your own personal utopia.
And get this whole utopian approach, it had some pretty staggering results. What started as just a tiny favor for a friend back in 1998, it grew into this beloved company that just 10 years later sold for a whopping $22 million. So how on earth did that even happen? So let's rewind a bit to 1997. Derek Sivers was a professional musician, and all he wanted to do was sell his own CD online. The problem was the big online stores back then would only work with major distributors, and that whole system was just awful. Sivers wanted no part of it. So he did what any determined musician would do. He painstakingly taught himself how to code and built his very own Buy Now button.
Well, the second his musician friends saw his website, they all asked him the exact same thing. Hey, could you sell my CD too? He said yes, thinking, it's just a favor for friends. But the calls just kept coming. And suddenly, Sivers found himself running a business he never, ever intended to start. One that was actually distracting him from his real dream of being a musician. Now, here's where things get really weird. To keep the business from getting too big and taking over his life, Sivers did something totally radical. Instead of drafting some ambitious business plan, he just daydreamed. He imagined a perfect world, but from a musician's point of view. And he decided he would build a utopia just for his customers, the independent artists. And this just illustrates his mission perfectly. These 4 simple rules were the complete opposite of the frustrating music industry. Think about it. Pay artists weekly, not a year later. Treat their fans like their fans, giving them the contact info. Never ever kick them out for not selling enough, and create a totally level playing field with no pay-to-play shenanigans. For thousands of artists, this was an absolute dream come true. The business model itself was just as simple. You want to know how he came up with it? He literally walked into a local record store, asked them how they did it, and just copied their model. That was it. The artist sets the price, CD Baby keeps a flat $4, and they pay you every single week. This model never, ever changed, even when the company was pulling in millions. And you can really see the stark contrast right here. On one side, you've got the typical corporate system, complex, slow, often unfair. And on the other, you have this radically simple artist-first approach. It wasn't a revolution born out of some big protest. It was just plain uncommon sense that served people way, way better. But it wasn't just about these big revolutionary business ideas. Sivers really understood that sometimes it's the smallest, most human touches that can create the deepest loyalty and make people fall in love with your company. He took the most boring, standard thing ever, the shipping confirmation email, and he turned it into this, a goofy, absolutely hilarious message that just made customers smile. This one little email generated thousands of new customers through pure word of mouth, all because it was unexpected and just completely delightful. And that human touch, it didn't stop there. Let's say a musician needed a really big favor, like re-uploading all their album art or something complicated. The official company policy was simple: buy the staff a pizza. It was this funny, memorable way to show that there were real, friendly people behind the website, not just some faceless corporation. Okay, but it wasn't all fun and games. This kind of explosive, accidental growth, well, it came with some serious challenges and growing pains. Sivers learned some incredibly painful lessons along the way. Check this out. Years earlier, to get a $20,000 loan from his dad for a recording studio, Sivers signed some papers without really reading them. Big mistake. He found out later he'd unknowingly sold 90% of his company. And because CD Baby was accidentally created under that same corporate structure, he had to pay full market value, $3.3 million, just to buy his own company back. What a brutal lesson in paying attention to the details. Sivers also hit a massive breaking point. The company had 8 employees, but he was still the bottleneck for every single decision. He was working 15-hour days, just totally trapped. He realized the only way out was to somehow make himself completely unnecessary to the day-to-day operations of the business.
His method for this was just brilliant. Instead of just answering questions all day, he would gather the team, explain the philosophy behind his answer, and then empower them to make the decision themselves next time. He wrote everything down in a company manual. After about 2 months of this, there were no more questions. He was finally free. But there's a fine line. He learned another super tough lesson here. He delegated so much that he basically abdicated. He empowered his employees so much that they started to feel like they owned the company, and they even tried to vote him out. The lesson was clear. Trust and empower your team, for sure, but never, ever completely surrender your responsibility as the owner. And this brings us to what might be the most profound and important part of this whole story. After all that success and all the struggles, Sivers came to realize that the ultimate goal of business, and maybe of life, isn't just endless growth. It's about figuring out what's enough. He realized that true satisfaction, the real joy, comes from the process. It comes from being a great singer or being a skilled entrepreneur, not just from having the finished product. The joy is in the journey, not just reaching the destination. You sign up for a marathon because you love the running, not so you can take a taxi to the finish line. There's this fantastic story that just nails this idea perfectly. The author Kurt Vonnegut was at a party hosted by some billionaire, and he was kind of lamenting that the billionaire made more money in a single day than his famous novel had made in its entire lifetime. His friend, the author Joseph Heller, replied with this killer line: he had enough. And so when Derek Sivers sold CD Baby for $22 million, he decided he already had enough. Before the sale even happened, he transferred ownership of the entire company into a charitable trust. All of that money would go to music education. He wasn't sacrificing a thing. He was simply choosing happiness and freedom over a number in a bank account that he just didn't need. So at the end of the day, the story of CD Baby is this incredibly powerful reminder that your business, and really your life, can be anything you want it to be. It's your creation. So the final question isn't about business plans or venture capital. It's about you. You get to design your perfect world. What does yours look like?